Howdy, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a returning guest, but at the same time a new guest. So Dr. Jessup was on once before, but because of the post-production issue, we are going to go ahead and record, and we have a new updated studio, better production quality. So here we are going to interview Dr. Len Jessup.
Good to be back.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Yeah. New space, which is kind of nice. And we're excited to kind of go through, I know, and I'm sorry, kind of go through the story of where we are at today, or how we got to the point we're at today. But at the same time, what is going on? And I have some interest in some specific topics. So, why are we here? How did you get to Las Vegas?
Well, let's see. How did I get to Las Vegas? I was down minding my own business in Tucson, Arizona, dean of the business school there, my alma mater, and a search firm kind of came knocking at the door and said, "Hey, would you think about the presidency at UNLV?" So short story is that's how I ended up here. I'd been thinking about maybe presidencies. Is that something I might want to try? But nothing had come along that sort of, got my interest like UNLV did. This is it's a special place, special university, and that was an incredible time to come up here when I did that. And anyway, so that's how I landed here, and we've kept this as our home, still here, 10 years later.
It's very nice. So I was going to ask, what year was that when I guess the initial conversation started? Boy,
like 2013, 2014, these things, the search process typically takes a year for these things, so... kind of around that time frame. And then I was in the job for 3.5, 4 years, sort of like 2014 to 2018, kind of around that time.
So what's the average length of a presidency?
It's shortening by the day. It used to be that people would stay in these jobs for a decade or more, decades even. That's rare now. I mean, you rarely see somebody. There are a couple of presidents around the country that have gone that long, but it's rare. Now... There's actually data from AGB and ACE, it maybe is 5 years, but even to me that sounds high. Well, that sounds long.
Why is it shortened so much?
People are turning over. The industry's in disruption right now. Clayton Christensen was great business school professor at Harvard, has now passed away, and he's the guy that wrote about the innovator's dilemma and creative disruption and how organizations and industries get disrupted. And higher ed now is going through its disruption. Big enrollment crunch because of the birth rate decline. The finances, the business model underlying higher ed are not working. Even before the federal funding, the cuts and all that stuff that's happening now, even before that. Out of the 4,000 colleges and universities in the country, most of them are going broke, and really hurting for enrollment. Their business model just doesn't work. So you got that. Then all the politics layered on top of that, those business model problems now, a lot of politics. We saw that last spring. Remember all the presidents we saw in the news that were, up on Capitol Hill getting interviewed and raked over the coals. And many of them lost their jobs over issues in Gaza. So you got all those politics kind of layered on top of it, and it's just made the job untenable. So people don't want to do it. And if they do, they don't last long in the job.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
tough.
That's crazy.
Tough job.
4,000. That's an insane.
iPads, a federal database. It's like 4,000 plus colleges, universities of all kinds. There's many of them. It's a big industry actually. Many of them suffering though.
Wow. I don't know. It's both sad to hear, but at the same time, I understand why. Right? We have the access to information everywhere. ChatGPT alone is a huge disruptor for everything that's going on. And so, what is the value of a formal education anymore? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, you still need the attorney, and you need the CPA, and you need the engineer. You know what I mean? Especially in these professions. But I've got a friend who's a very seasoned attorney in Silicon Valley who's helping me on a number of things, and he uses ChatGPT a lot. When you've got somebody like that, with that kind of experience, armed with a really effective, large language model who knows the prompts and knows how to ask things and feed it information, that's an incredible combination. But you still need the human at the moment.
That's a good point. That's fair. So you're part of you're a fellow at the Lindsay Institute. Were there any direct negative impacts from the cut in government funding towards like the Lindsay Institute, and also what is the Lindsay Institute?
Lindsay Institute is the public policy think tank at UNLV, and it also kind of manages the relationship between UNLV and the Brookings Institute. So Brookings Mountain West and the Lindsay Institute, kind of one and the same. It's kind of the same group of people. Public policy. So being a fellow means that I basically get to work on research projects that are interesting to me, and I get to choose what I do. So, for example, we're wrapping up a study of the startup ecosystem. It's just something I was interested in, and one of the students was interested in it, Sean Curry, and so we're working on that as a project, as an example. Not really affected by the stuff going on with the federal funding, because the Lindsay Institute is primarily privately funded. There are endowments that have come in from the Fulfillment Fund and other places and then the payouts from those endowments are largely what fund the institute.
Very nice. What did we learn about the startup ecosystem in Vegas?
Yeah, my gut told me that it had grown. 10 years since I first set foot here, and then in the 6 years that I was gone down working at one of the Claremont colleges in L.A. I had a hunch that it felt like stuff had really grown here in the startup ecosystem. So, I mean, that proved to be true. We got data from a company called Deal Room based in Amsterdam, and they track investments into startups all over the world. And they provided some incredible data. Two quick little factoids. One, and this kind of fit my hunch, over the last couple of years, the Las Vegas startup ecosystem ranked in the top 5. Not in volume of deal flow, but in year-over-year percentage growth. So it's definitely a city on the rise for startup investment. And then the other one that blew me away was in 2024, if you just did the cumulative sort of book value of all the startups and included everything going back 10 or 15 years, so Switch, the data center, Zappos with Tony Hsieh, and then influential TensorWave's a relatively new one, Boxable. The cumulative value of all those startups, $19 billion.
Damn.
And it made the point that even though the ecosystem here is sort of new and growing, the hit rate on unicorns is actually pretty high. That there are a handful of really incredible, like Switch going public. The hit rate is really good.
Wow.
In a kind of a burgeoning market for startups.
That's kind of fun to know. It could be, constantly among us. There's a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
It makes me feel confident.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like it's the place to be. And there's a lot of I think it's nice to know that there are other individuals that are here. I think Bucked Up Nutrition was one of the brands that came out here as well. AG1 originally started in Vegas as well, and so you have I think if I remember correctly, and so you have these huge massive even supplement companies that are out of this town, and that from my perspective there's an opportunity here. This is a good thing, but now they end up leaving, which is the sad part. Ideally, they stay here like a Switch, and then they can really have a longer lasting impact.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing we found was that the ecosystem has become much better organized in that 5 to 10 year time frame. So there's now actually a couple of decent pre-seed and seed funds. So mechanisms for early angel capital. There's some good incubators and business accelerators in town. Zero Labs is a good example of one that UNLV hosts up at Blackfire Innovation. So that that part of it has actually now kind of come together and is pretty good, but it lacks deep local capital, like a bigger local venture capital fund that's for Las Vegas. And that's why, like you say, some of these companies get picked off. That's kind of been the history. Because as they may start and as they get grow up and they need some serious capital, if that capital's not here, they're going to tend to go where the capital is, or the capital is going to take them, to the Bay Area or to Austin or wherever that capital's coming from.
Is that a desire from that investor? Are they you're moving where you're gonna where we're gonna be? Why not just keep them where they're at?
Yeah.
And let them grow where they send them the cash and then let them be where they're at.
The old joke in Silicon Valley was that that they wouldn't invest unless it was within a 45-minute drive of Sand Hill Road. And I think that was largely true before COVID, but I think that's changed. It's relaxed a little bit now. I think people understand that it's maybe being in a certain place isn't as important as it used to be. and a lot more, things happening virtually, both in the corporate world and the startup world. But still, when these companies, the funds are going to make a multi-million-dollar investment, they want it to be something that they can touch and feel and check in on, and and that they have trust in it. And so I think there's still kind of a proximity effect.
I mean, I value proximity, like working inside of an office versus working at home. I think you're more productive working in the office, right? But it would just seem like, oh man, they're doing really well in that town. Why would I want to pull them away?
Yeah, you would think that, but I think, for a lot of these people, I think they just feel more comfortable when they know they can keep tabs on whatever it is. This is an investor now. You know what I mean? It's not like it's your boss inside the company. This is the person that's been putting all the money in to keep the thing going and try to get it to the next level. When I was at University of Arizona, I'll give you a quick example that's kind of on this topic. When I was there as a PhD student in the late 80s, the company locally that hired most of the graduates out of the business school that I was in was Raytheon in Tucson, not a big surprise, and still the biggest employer in Tucson. Then when I went back 20 plus years later to be the dean of the business school, I always joked that they must not have checked my transcripts to have me come back to be the dean. But anyway, so I was back. But then that had changed. The company locally hiring most of the students out of the business school was not Raytheon anymore, although they hired a fair number. But it was a spin-out from the university. Ventana Medical Systems, came out of a professor out of the medical school. It was cancer diagnostics. And this is kind of maybe counter to the point we were talking about. What I liked about that, and the lesson I took from that, was that Ventana Medical Systems grew. Roche gets interested in it and buys it, but decides to keep it in Tucson. And it's still there. Now it's Roche Tissue Diagnostics, and they're running a lot of their diagnostics through that location. It's technically in Oro Valley, it's sort of a little town just on the northern outskirts of Tucson. But left it there, and it's a huge employer still there, hiring lots of graduates, incredible jobs, lots of tax revenue. I mean, that to me is what more of that needs to happen here. We need to do everything we can to keep these companies here, like that one, so they have their exit, so to speak, or liquidity event, and everybody does great, but the company's still there and still in town and throwing out a lot of revenue.
If you want, can you make sure that guy just stays close to you real quick? No, you're good. These chairs are like the best chairs ever, Anthros chairs, and they kind of like lean back every so often. So you just stay close to the mic. Yeah. And then what is an expectation from from a startup for a investor to take, like, what percentage of equity, I would assume, is equities being taken? What percentage of equity is usually given up whenever a individual is looking at a business?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it's all over the map. It just depends at what stage they're in, how well they're doing, how desperate are they for the next round of cash. So it kind of all over the map. Okay. But it can range anywhere from giving away a little sliver, of a single digit kind of a percentage of the company, to giving away most of the company, depending on how bad they need, that next infusion of cash. So
damn.
It just depends.
I thought that there was, like, as a startup guy, you're like, okay, I have a maximum, I want to give away 10%, right? Giving away equity is not easy, but at the same time, having a business is better than not having a business, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if there's a typical pattern, that entrepreneur may only give away 5 or 10% for the initial, I mean, even smaller than that when it's the sort of friends and family round. Then maybe it's 5-10% when they're, talking to a serious angel investor. Then they get into that sort of first round of venture capital, and maybe now you're up to 20 or 30%.
Damn.
And, by the time you get to your B round and your C round, the exit of the successful entrepreneur with the big unicorn company that does well, they're probably down to 5 or 10%. By the time they get to the end, that's how much they own. But then that's on a, if it's a unicorn, the classic definition is it's $1 billion exit. But so, 5% of $1 billion, it's not bad.
Not a bad takeaway.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea. I just, like, it really sounds like you're working yourself out of the job or like the business, and then it is, I don't know, I don't ever necessarily see myself having like an exit, but that's like I think like the dream, I think, for most entrepreneurs, right? Like you build the
A
business,
lot of serial
exit, and walk away.
entrepreneurs like to, and then maybe stay on for a year or two in a kind of a contractual relationship, and then unless they have a non-compete or whatever, then quickly moving to whatever the next venture is. That's the classic serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
One after the other. There are several of those in town also who are here kind of under the radar that people don't know about, that have had 4, 5, 6 great companies, great exits, and are here living under the radar and on to the next great thing.
How fun. I want to meet those people. I want to know like what goes inside of your brain whenever we're dealing with not just that kind of money, but like how does the brain work? It's just, I'm interested.
Yeah, I think there are people who just like to create and like to have impact in that way. They really love doing it, and often that DNA doesn't fit well with large corporate kind of environment. So as the company gets big, I think it becomes less and less attractive to them. They kind of want to start over, and start something new.
You get addicted to the game of just building businesses.
Yeah, yeah.
How fun. What are you looking at whenever we're looking, like, so the fund's starting to come out. What are we looking at whenever we're finding businesses in town?
Yeah, so I'll back up and say a little bit about the fund.
Yeah.
I mean, I talked about the study we did with the Lindsay Institute. One of the findings was, the town really needs a proper venture capital fund now for Las Vegas. And it's something that I had been thinking about, and others at UNLV, ever since I got here 10 years ago. But a lot had to happen first. So, I mean, UNLV had to grow up and become a Carnegie R1 research institution that has faculty doing research at a level where they're throwing out inventions from labs, and startups can be formed around them. That all had to be put into place. We needed to build out.
You say that like casually. I mean,
check these things out. This has all been done. Building out an Office of Economic Development, creating mechanisms around tech transfer and commercialization of the inventions, hiring the right people to build and run those things, and all that that's all in place now. So when I wrapped up down in Claremont and I got back up here this past summer, I picked up the conversations with Bo Bernard and Zach Miles, who were in the Blackfire Innovation, the Office of Economic Development, and we all agreed it was time. And then I started working on the Lindsay Institute study, and I got the deal room data, and it confirmed that it is time. And it's still lacking the capital, but the ecosystem now is ready for it. There's enough going on here in the environment. So we all agreed that it was time to do it. So then we took the fall to kind of formulate the strategy, and then the structure, the proper structure of the fund, and then putting that all into place just after the Christmas holidays. And then it took me another 4 to 6 weeks to create the structure for the fund. So it's Desert Forge Ventures. And the typical fund structure, classic structure, is you create a kind of a limited partnership that holds the fund, and an LLC that's the management company that kind of then runs things from a day-to-day basis. So that's all in place now. I've got a great team built. All my documents are in line, and I've got a deck, as any good founder has.
Yeah.
And just literally within a few days, late last week, I began the official fundraising for the fund. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's kind of
I think so.
That's the sort of this. Oh, what are we looking for? So that's kind of the status now, and just getting started. Let me give you some examples of some of the things in the companies that we've seen, and I've made commitments to 2 of them because I think it answers the question: what are we looking for in these things? So for this fund, the goal is, like we're talking about, the goal is to grow great companies that stay here in the Las Vegas Valley, that help to build out the economy and add to it, and hopefully even diversify it so that the economy becomes more robust, more recession resistant, more sustainable over the long run, so that when there are downturns, we don't get hit quite as hard here, because whatever happens here in Las Vegas, it affects the economy of the whole state. So that's everybody's aim, and we love the businesses in hospitality and gaming and entertainment and now sports, but we're trying to add to that. Wouldn't turn away any cool startups in gaming tech or hospitality tech, but wow, great if we can find things in AI and clean tech and medical devices and everything else. So we're looking primarily at stuff coming out of UNLV. But even though UNLV now is a Carnegie R1 research institution and there's some cool stuff coming out, it's not enough yet to supply the full deal flow for a fund. So number one is anything cool coming out of UNLV, but number two is anything else we see in the ecosystem here in the Las Vegas Valley that's cool. And then third is actively recruiting companies, startups to come into the ecosystem. And we've got great partners. The LVGEA locally that's what they do, recruiting companies in, both big and small. Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance, Betsy Fretwell is now running it. Tina Quigley had a stint before that. And then companies like the innovation arm of LG, LG Nova, Intel Capital are partners. We're sourcing things out of the University of Arizona also. And so, anything we can see anywhere really in the world, if it's something that's better off here or they want to be here, that we'll fund them. And that's, the contingency is they got to be here and they got to be willing to stay here and grow here. So that it's a broad net. So then let me give you some of the examples to answer the question. One great one coming out of UNLV waiver is from mechanical engineering professor Jeremy. And he was interested in water. We're in the desert, and everybody's one of the grand challenges on the planet is do we have enough drinking water for people? You can pull water out of humid air pretty easily. There's a number of ways to do that, but it's much more difficult to do that in an arid environment like we are in a desert. And here it's incredibly, the humidity is hitting single digits often, during many parts of the year, hardly any rain. So he gets the inspiration from a desert frog they pull water through their skin, and then that's how they drink. So how do they do that? So he and his grad students set out to figure that out. They perfected a gel membrane that kind of acts like the skin on the frog, and they figured out that they could use that to pull water. If they ran air through that, they could pull water out of the air doing that, even in very arid lab environments. So now they've got a contraption that looks like a little AC unit with multiple levels of this gel membrane, the skin, and they use a saline solution in there too that kind of also helps. And they're pulling water in through all these membranes. The little saline solution is helping. It runs through a little distillery and then pops out of a little tube, and then there's water. That could either be gray water or potable water. So they've now it bench tested, works. They've now got it out in several prototypes outside the building working. And so we've committed to funding for them. The Governor's Office of Economic Development has a source of funds that they're tapping into federally, and they've agreed to match dollar for dollar anything that the fund does. So both the kind of the GoEd funding mechanism and us have committed that we're going to put money into waiver.
Nice.
So that's an example of one coming out of UNLV. It's a great invention, something that is going to have great impact on people and planet. But that also pencils that looks like something that's probably also going to generate money and revenue. But more than that, I think it's great need, great impact, great team. They've got their minimum viable product, their MVP. It works. The total addressable market and their serviceable, obtainable market both look really good, all well protected with patents. I mean, it's all, everything lines up for that one. Boy, perfect.
You're investing in the IP at that point, right? So there's
the promise of the IP and the people around it. Do we believe that they can make it happen?
What an interesting outlook. I always think that, I guess, it was supposed to be like, okay, well, if you're doing X amount of dollars in revenue, then this is a good idea. Then we can go ahead and do something. Yeah. But I guess it's cool to hear, or nice to hear, that there's also like, let's just invest in the IP, given also the team. We know the team. They're out of UNLV. There's a lot of, there's already been a lot that's gone into that research. Now, I guess, do they work with the business school to figure out, okay, what's like the market? Like, is it that interdisciplinary inside of the university? Or did that specific researcher end up doing that research to see whether they're going to be able to be in the market?
Yeah, I mean, so that in that case, the professor and the students, perfected the invention or the innovation, and then smartly, created the company and pulled in a grizzled veteran to be their CEO, Rich Sloan, locally. one of the guys that started Startup Nation, and got a lot of startups and fundraising and venture capital to his credit. And Rich is also helping me with the fund as well. So he was serving as an entrepreneur in residence for UNLV, specifically to be somebody to plug into one of these startups. And so that was a great move. Having Rich be the guy to take Waiver out of the gate. It was a really smart move. I'll give you another example of one in that second category that's it's not a UNLV startup, but it's in the Las Vegas Valley. This one came out at UC Irvine. It's medical device. And again, the scientists behind it very smartly hired a veteran from the medical device industry who lives here in Vegas, Ray, one of these guys who's under the radar, Ray Liu, L-I-U. It's Vena Vitals. They're incubating up in the Roseman campus. Roseman University bought the old cancer center buildings up off the 215. 3 big, beautiful buildings full of wet labs that had never been used.
Wow.
Roseman has purchased that. Now that's now kind of their west campus. And they're incubating about 6 companies up there, mostly in the healthcare domain. Vena Vitals is continuous blood pressure monitoring. So quickly, normally we go in, you get the cuff when you're going to get your blood pressure taken at the doctor's. When you're in surgery, and if you're going to be in there for a couple of hours, they can't do the cuff for a variety of reasons. But they also need accurate, continuous blood pressure all the way through everything, second by second. The state of the art is they got to go in with a needle in your arm or some other mechanism, but it's invasive, and they might not be able to do that given the surgery that they're doing. So how do you solve that problem? And the scientists, set out to solve it. And the solution that Vena Vitals has got is just like the little sensors in our watch, kind of based on that principle. They developed a little thin, very accurate membrane circuit, little thin circuit on, usually they're printed on like plastic, or in this case, it's almost like a rubber material, and you print something that conducts like silver ink or something. And then, and you fold it, and it makes a contact. And then they put it inside like a little comfortable little cuff that can either go on your wrist or your ankle, and then Velcro. And then it Bluetooths to an app on an iPad that'll sit in the operating room, and then it'll measure your blood pressure. And then when you're done, you could even just throw the thing away. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter at that point after you're done, and relatively inexpensive. So that's kind of the primary core platform technology for Vena Vitals. And Ray is a good veteran, out of the medical device industry. We've made a commitment to fund them. And then now GoEd, the governor's office, that team is going through their due diligence on the match. And so that's an example of one from my second category, that it's not necessarily UNLV, but it's something cool, that we see here in the ecosystem that I think's got a lot of promise. But that's an example again of one where I think the inventors smartly realize that maybe they're not necessarily the ones, to best mount the launch and the startup, and they went and got a professional to do it for them. It's a good move.
How fun. I mean, those are some really cool projects. I mean, really innovative, really neat things.
Yeah, that are going to make a difference for people.
Yeah.
Both of them.
High impact, high value, and like oddly, I don't know, like they seem like not attainable, but like accessible, I guess, is the thing. It's really neat.
Yeah, when you get into it, right, it's pretty simple, both of them, pretty practical. Yeah. You can understand it. Not like this is rocket science. It's teetering on some kind of, odd scientific principle, not yet proven. I mean, it's pretty basic stuff that you can see the pathway for it.
How cool. So what happens with the students that are involved? Like they're through the university and then they're working on this project. What happens with the students that are involved? Are they part of the company? Do they take ownership? Are they just kind of like, hey, thanks, see you later? What happens?
Typically on these university-based inventions, if it's something that's developed like in a lab at the university and maybe federal funding like NSF or NIH funding is, kind of what helps drive the research in the lab. The lab is on university property. It's owned by the university. In most cases, the IP policy at the universities are such that the university technically owns the IP. But if the faculty member then wants to do something based on that, do a startup, the university will license the technology then to the startup exclusively to then go for it and do whatever they can with it. And And the faculty, the inventors, it might be faculty members, it might be graduate students, or a combination of them, will own a piece of that IP no matter what happens with it. And then if they're involved in the startup, then they'll also have a piece of the startup and a little bit of that equity as well. So it can be pretty lucrative for the graduate students. Typically, sometimes it's undergrad students, but it's mostly graduate students in research labs. And they'll typically own a piece of it, and they can do quite well from it.
That makes me happy. It makes me I don't know. I always thought that there was like one, because it's at the university. It's technically university property.
Yeah.
That they're just like, that was part of the research, and like, hey, thanks, but we'll see you later. Yeah. But it's nice to know that there is a cut for them as well.
Yeah. Typically, everybody involved. And sometimes it's a pretty involved. I don't know what you describe it, but it's not a cap table necessarily, but it shows everybody at the university, who owns the IP. And so it's the inventors, might be students and faculty. And then sometimes it'll even show that then also a little bit will go to their home department, and then to their home school or college, and then to the university, and it'll sort of specify the breakdowns of the sharing of the IP.
Talk about a good, I guess that's the value of being an R1 research university.
Yeah.
Like that's I didn't really realize that there was that's the reason,
Research like this goes on, and like the NSF has long funded grand challenges, food, water, energy, you know what I mean? They're trying to aim faculty at important topics, so that, and NIH, same thing. So that tends to drive then, really highly value adding research that goes on the campuses. And then when there is a breakthrough discovery, it typically is important. I mean, it makes a big difference in people's lives. But also there's this whole tech transfer and commercialization aspect too, that the research universities have, now, dove into head first, for, probably a good 30, 40, even 50 years. They figured it out pretty quickly that, boy, there's actually, it's not only, if I commercialize this as a university, I can only put that into practice so that it actually does impact people. It's not just a great paper that was published, but now it's actually a company that's actually selling that product or service. But that there's a revenue, stream from it, too, for the universities, which has been important for them.
Yeah, and then they get to own that piece of that. There's a huge return, and even then, there's still a lot of universities that aren't doing why, if that's, it seems like a great business model.
Yeah.
Right? So then where's the drop off?
So think about it, right? And we mentioned in that federal database, 4,000 plus colleges and universities of all kinds. So that's the whole ocean. Then if you think about in the United States, the AAUs, they're the top 50 or so research universities. There's some Canadian schools that are included. The full list is in the 60s, but the U.S.-based institutions, these are the top research universities in the country. There's really only about 55 of them that operate at a high level. So a private like Stanford, or a public like the University of Washington or the University of Arizona. University of Arizona, just as an example of an AAU institution, their grant-funded research expenditures just topped $1 billion for the year. So you got to think about that as a sort of an engine of innovation. Then the Carnegie R1s, that's now, they just added it was about 120 or 130. They just added some schools, so it might be a little bit bigger than that. But so not just the top 55, now you're talking about the bigger little scoop, bigger net of maybe 130 or 140 research institutions. UNLV now is in that group, has been now for a few years. UNLV just topped about $100 million a year for its grant-funded research expenditures. And then once you get outside of the that kind of Carnegie R1 list, it drops off pretty quickly. The rest of the whatever the rest are, 3,800 and whatever, they're primarily teaching focused. So to your point, so why don't they try to jump on that? Becoming a research institution, because it's expensive. You've got to have the money to be able to build labs and infrastructure, and wet labs in particular, really expensive. And then you've got to be able to, you got to have the revenue to hire great faculty. And faculty in those domains don't come cheap. because they typically need a startup package. They got to be in a lab. They're going to need equipment. They got to measure things. They need to have graduate students helping them in the lab. It's an expensive endeavor. So most of the 4,000 institutions just can't even play. They can't afford it.
Why would I would never go to one of those schools if I can choose to go one of these schools.
It depends what you want. I mean, there's a lot of good teaching-oriented schools. Like where I was in Claremont, it's a consortium of 7 private colleges that share services together. They're independent schools, but they share services together. Economically, it works better that way. The 5 undergrad campuses, Pomona, Pitzer, Scripps, Harvey Mudd, and Claremont McKenna, are incredible. All 5 are ranked in the top 25 or 30 private liberal arts colleges in the country. Unbelievable undergraduate experience. It's a great place to go for an undergrad, but they're not research oriented in the ways that we're talking about now. But it's still a great place to go. They don't do graduate stuff. So then I ran Claremont Graduate University. That was all graduate, just master's and PhD students, and we were all research focused. And so you could still get a great undergraduate experience without being at a big research university. You don't have to go that path if you don't want to.
If I just wanted the education, there's options.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is probably just personal opinion. I would just choose the R1s. I mean, why would you go otherwise? Like the connections, the opportunities that are there to get hands-on experience would be, I would imagine, pretty influential or impactful for the rest of my existence.
So I have a bit of a bias, but even as an undergrad, to be at least one of those Carnegie R1s, because you think about you're going to get a really cool full campus experience. As an undergrad, you might want to work in one of those labs, which they often do. They often employ undergrads as techs in the labs to do things. What a cool experience that can be. And then they tend to also be among the Carnegie R1s. They also tend to be D1 schools for athletics. Because there's a little bit more than 100 D1 football, and it's about 300 for D1 basketball. So they tend to also have athletics, the full kind of campus college experience. And yeah, I'm a little bit biased, but that's kind of the model I came up through, and it's a pretty fun place to be an undergrad.
I guess I am also biased because I have only been at R1 universities. So I guess I just don't know what the experience is at one of those Claremont undergraduate colleges. So it's okay.
Yeah, I mean so the difference is it's D3 sports, so you're not going there, to go to the football stadium and root for the team necessarily. D3 sports, it's really fun. I went to a lot of the games while I was down there for the undergrads. It was a lot. They were great and it was fun. But it's those are colleges that they're smaller. So you're talking about University of Arizona, 42,000 students. Arizona State University is more like 80,000 in Tempe, and like another 90,000 online. I mean, these are behemoth institutions. The Claremont colleges, each of them's around, maybe let's just say round numbers, around 1,000 students total. So little small cohorts of students coming in, very small, intimate seminars for the courses. You got dedicated faculty. That's all they're doing. The focus is on the experience that the students are having. Though beautiful campuses, those students tend to live on campus together for the whole 4 years. And a lot of it's built around the student experience. And like at Claremont McKenna, that one's focused on people going into, so you major in economics or political science. They're for people kind of going into professions, and there's a lot of training around that, or going to grad school. So it's a pretty special experience too. It's just different.
I guess, for lack of a better comparison from personal experience, it sounds like almost like the ideal summer camp, like where I'm going to get very aggressive, studying. So I went during my, I had summer camps that were just STEM focused. So I went to the university. It was just engineering focused, and it was a great time. It was a very small cohort. We got to meet a lot of really cool people from all around the city or the different cities, but it was very intimate. I loved it. A great time. And I was on campus. And that seems very similar to that experience where that does sound attractive. That can be a really fun time. You create some really good relationships, long-term relationships, you get into good education. And it's very in-depth education, I would imagine, or very one-on-one, more one-on-one than
very individualized.
Yeah.
Very personal.
300 people in an auditorium.
Yeah.
Which can be a different beast.
It's a different experience. You know what I mean? Nothing's perfect or the right way or necessarily better. It just depends on the person and what are you looking for and what's better for you to succeed.
Very nice.
Yeah.
If you were asked to be president again, would you?
I'm done. No, I've been doing this for 35 years. When I got out of the PhD program at Arizona, 1989, so whatever that is, 35, 36 years, in the front end of that as a faculty member, and then probably 20 years in leadership roles, kind of from dean and above. And, 2 times as dean and once as a VP and twice as president. So 20 years in those kind of high rev, high octane, high pressure jobs, and that's enough. I feel like I made my mark. I like to think that I made a difference and had an impact, and I kind of got it out of my system. I'm like, no, I'm good. There's nothing left to prove. I'm good. So
cool.
I'm young enough to do. I'm 63. I'll be 64 here in a little bit, and I take care of myself. I try to. I'm young enough and I have the physical stamina that I could do another gig probably, but I don't know that it's in my heart, at this point to do that. I've had my run.
Does this feel different, like being in this role versus president role?
Oh yeah.
Different worlds entirely?
Totally different. I've got a T-shirt on. I'm, in those roles, they're executive roles. So I was in a coat and tie and suit, a lot of the time. Your life is programmed for you, like any executive really, in any industry, kind of doesn't matter, but you're programmed. So, I would start out with a scheduled business breakfast with a business group or to speak at Rotary or whatever it was at 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And then a full day of meetings on and off campus. And here at UNLV, we were typically, Christy, my wife and I were typically triple booked every night of the week, Monday through Saturday, like 3 events. And so we'd have to stop by the game, go to a dinner, and maybe try to stop by another thing, get 2 or 3 things in a night, every night of the week, Saturday included, Saturday nights. And Sundays here, when I was at UNLV as president, we tried to reserve Sundays to not schedule ourselves unless it was a memorial service or something we would go to. But it didn't mean that I wasn't working. Sundays, I would typically be on the phone a lot with donors and with regents. And so Sunday was still kind of a work day, but I at least got to be at home. And that's the schedule. I did that for 4 years in that role and not nonstop. You never stop. So you can only take so much of that, right? Your body and your psyche, you can only do so much of that. You just get worn out. You got to be very careful.
It's a lot of volume for a long time.
Yeah. So now I've got total control of my time. I wear what I want to wear. I do what I want. I'm going where I want. I just feel like I've got more control, less stress, and having fun. And yeah, it's good.
What are the jobs of the regents?
Yeah, so the regents are in any state, whether they're called regents or trustees, there's a board usually, whether it's a public or private university, that however the mechanism is that they get into those roles, they're the fiduciary for the university. They're technically responsible to have oversight for the university and to act as a proper fiduciary to only do, and there's sort of very specific rules around what it means to be a fiduciary, but you're basically there to take care of the university, to oversee it. You never do anything to harm it or humiliate it, or anything. You're there to take care of it and make sure that it's okay. That's kind of the fundamental sort of fiduciary promise. The difference is that in most of the states, for the public universities, the regents are appointed by the governor. It's typically you're appointed by the governor, then kind of ratified by the state legislature, kind of like we do for Supreme Court at the federal level. In about 5 states, the states don't follow that model, and Nevada's one of them. The regents are elected; they're elected officials. So it's a very different model that creates sort of different sets of circumstances and motivations and aspirations and stuff like that. And people can debate whether it's good or bad, but it's a different and not common model that we follow here in Nevada.
What are the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, so at University of Arizona and then at Washington State University, I got to interact very closely with the regent boards at those 2 places. Those are 2 states where, like is more common, the regents are appointed by the governors. The governors tend to appoint very high-level executives into those roles. So like an example, when I was at WSU, University of Washington's board had one of the founders of Costco, was on the board. And the lady that at the time was, and I'm going to blank on her name, but she was running REI, the sporting equipment company. I mean, it's a high caliber people that were put on that board that really, and the governors were careful to pick people that cared about the institutions and those people that cared about UW. They were, they were either alum or really cared about the institution. And at WSU, same thing. We had the executive that ran Boeing Commercial Airlines at the time that was an alum from WSU, and a gentleman that ran Chateau Saint Michel, right, one of the biggest winery conglomerates here in the United States. So, I mean, we had powerful people on those two boards who were used to running, big organizations. They understood how boards work. They understood what it meant to be fiduciaries, and they were incredible board members. And same thing at University of Arizona. The guy that I got the closest to was the guy that ran all IBM for the state of Arizona and in the region, and he, an executive, very successful. And he was one of the regents. So again, high caliber appointees. In the elected model, you're an elected official, so it kind of doesn't really matter what your background is. You just have to win a race. And here in the state of Nevada, compared to all the races, you think about the whole ballot, all the way from governor and special initiatives, and then what we call down ballot. You're getting down to judges and regents and stuff down the list. And down ballot, people often don't know what they're voting for. They don't know any of the candidates, and they're just kind of checking names. And regent is one of the ones down ballot that you can win that race. It doesn't take a lot of money to win the race. And so we often get a lot of political hopefuls that start with regent because you can win that one, and then you can kind of make a name for yourself, and then you can work up to city council. County commission is a coveted position that actually pays a little bit, and then go to the state assembly. And then we've had people do that have had remarkable careers, like Shelley Berkeley followed that pathway to Congress, is now the mayor of Las Vegas. Steve Sisolak followed that path into the governor's mansion. So, I mean, there's some people that have followed the path and done quite well. But the motivation of a lot of the people is to do that. Sometimes you'll get a really good, successful executive person. Not that the other people aren't good, but I mean that you'll get a successful person from the Valley that is running for regent because they care about either an institution or an initiative. So a good example of that's Mark DeBrava is an eye doctor in town, quite good, and is a super guy. And he ran for regent and served a term or two as regent because he cared mostly about the medical school. And he pushed and was a strong advocate and helped us to get the medical school approved. So you'll occasionally pull in somebody like that. But you'll often get political hopefuls that for better or worse, have not run a large organization, and now you're a fiduciary for a multi-billion-dollar system. It's difficult. It stretches people. You know what I mean? So that's the downside.
It's an eye-opening experience, I would imagine. You got to get good real quick, or you just don't, I guess.
You got to get up to speed very fast. A lot of information, really fast, coming at you. Decision making, big decisions.
Rough.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah, very difficult. I would imagine the person with the experience of being in business would be the ideal candidate. But at the same time, if that's the track, then that's the track.
Some experience running something big. Yeah.
How fun. Let's see. One thing I wanted to get into is because we talked about it last time, and I want to talk about it again. And I will have some different questions, I think. Bringing Allegiant Stadium here, why was UNLV such an integral part of that deal?
Yeah, it was UNLV was a critical part because I think without the university it wouldn't have happened. And the primary reason was that the way to fund the project ultimately in the end was the room sort of special purpose room tax that for people generally staying on the Strip. I think we ended up the legislative act, I think then in the final vote didn't include anything out. It was like within a certain range on the Strip, wouldn't affect any of the resorts or hotels or casinos around the Valley. I think it was focused on just up and down the Strip. And it was a small percentage, room tacked onto every bill each day. And then in the end, because there was a group on the Strip that wanted to support the stadium, and there's a group that really wanted an expansion of the convention center. So the bill ended up including both. So that little bit of room tax, that money that yielded then was going to be split in half, part for stadium, part for the expansion and renovation of the convention center, and that was kind of the compromise. But no matter which side of that the people on the Strip that were really influential in doing all of this, they all were willing to do it if UNLV came along as part of the deal, because then for them it made sense not only from a business point of view for them, but also from a community point of view for them, that they would be helping the community, helping the university, to succeed, and the alumni and the people that would be able to experience the games in a new stadium. It was like that was sort of like there was the business side, but then there was sort of the philanthropic side, that it all made sense, and they were all willing to go along if UNLV was a part of the deal, because they were helping the institution. So I think us being in it was critical. I give credit to Brian Sandoval. He created the Southern Nevada Tourism and Infrastructure Committee. It was kind of a task force he put together, and then he asked me and Steve Hill to be the co-chairs for it, and he put some very influential people representing the Strip on it, and then other outside groups. And that group that he put together was kind of where a lot of this negotiation kind of got hammered out, which then led to the eventual the bill in the legislature. Special session all around it. I was there testifying on behalf of UNLV. I think having UNLV in the deal also helped up there, because it was like, all right, we're going to help we're not only going to do something, that's going to be good from a business point of view for Las Vegas, but we're helping the home, the home school. We're doing something for the home institution as well.
How are stadiums usually funded?
Well, they're almost always through a bonding mechanism like this one, where you borrow money to build whatever the thing is, and then you have to have a revenue stream to be paying off the payments on that bond. In this case, it's that room tax, broadly speaking. And that bonding is almost how all of them are built, unless there's just somebody really wealthy that's doing it, that can either put up a lot of the money up front or can qualify for the financing that it would need on their own without having to do like public or municipal bonds. But I mean, typically it's, there's some borrowing mechanism that's done. It's usually bonding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so whenever we're in those rooms, I wonder how much, like we're in a negotiations class, right? I think that's where we met. So how much are people like using a quote unquote, like a BATNA, right? Or are they like really using these tactics in order to accomplish a goal, and instead just like talking and being honest?
Yeah. What's your best agreement to a negotiated alternative?
Yeah.
It's kind of like I could walk away because I know I could do this, so I've got that in mind as I'm negotiating in here.
So I'm going to ask for more because I can do this over here. Like, are those games played, or are those games not so played, and it's just like, hey, we're here to accomplish a mission. Like, let's just get this done, and like, let's be honest.
I do think people psychologically are thinking of those things. It might even be subconscious, that it's like, I could walk away at any moment. I know I can go do this. So that's affecting what I'm willing to put up with in here. I think those things, those mechanisms operate.
Sure.
Psychologically. But it was a good experience for me. Everybody, the process of that task force I talked about, everybody we were working with on the Strip, and with the Raiders, with the governor, the legislature, I felt like everybody was, acting above board and in everybody's best interest. It was a really good experience for me. I even remember specifically, kind of your question, we had gotten through all of that, and then it came time at some point later in the process, we had to actually negotiate the use agreement for exactly how UNLV would, on a day-to-day basis, use the stadium. And then we got something drafted. I remember the final negotiations, and it was me and Mark Badane were kind of the two, because he at the time was CEO for the Raiders, and we had grown quite close through the process. So me and him were the ones who ultimately would have to sign this agreement. And then our kind of arbitrator was Steve Sisolak, and this was before governor, so he was still with the county commission. And then Steve Hill, who now runs the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, was kind of in the room as the kind of more conciliatory, making sure everybody gets along and we get all this stuff done. And we're kind of the four in the room. And Mark's like lifeline was to Mark Davis. And at the time, I had regents I had to keep in the loop. And then we had Desiree Reed-Francois was the AD at the time, who was an attorney. She had JD from University of Arizona.
Nice.
Of course, she's on my lifeline about contract stuff. And it stands out because in the midst of that negotiation, we were getting down to like that first season and the games, because we needed to think about the timing of who was going to play what games in the stadium, that fall that it opened in the preseason. And in college, we pre-schedule games way out in advance, especially the preseason games where you're trying to bring in some. So we had a game scheduled with Cal, for example, and a couple of other high-level institutions for preseason. So we come to that point in the negotiation, and I'm like, here's what I've got for preseason, and it blew up the room because Mark Bedane didn't realize we were scheduling that far out, and it would have meant that we had like 3 games in there before they would, the Raiders would even play a game, and it ticked him off, and it was a bone of contention where we had to leave the room and call our lifelines, and so we ended up negotiating through that. And
what came out of that? Like
we ended up, I think, pulling back maybe one of them. We left 2 in. He kind of understood that it's not a big deal if UNLV plays a couple of times. It's probably better ultimately for the Raiders to kind of do the shakedown cruise, with the boat a couple times with us before they fill the stadium with 65,000 people.
Yeah.
And so we ultimately, cooler heads prevailed and we negotiated it. And then it ended up being, that was the COVID year, and it kind of didn't matter. Because people, I think the games were played, but nobody was at the game. So it kind of didn't matter.
How fun.
He and I are very good friends now and have lunch and our wives and dinner together. But those are one of the things we look back and laugh. And remember how pissed off you were? Oh my God.
I mean, it seems like a high intense, like you're sitting in a room. It's just a high intensity situation with like, okay, we each have our own lifelines. How do we negotiate? We're gonna ultimately we need to come to a deal here, or this thing doesn't work. And it's just, I don't know. It seems like a fun, to be a fly on the wall in that conversation. I think would be really.
It was fun, and they were good. I mean, I thought the Raiders in particular treated us really well. So like that, our artificial turf. The first set of artificial turf that we were going to use, they bought for us. They allowed us to, we had final things like we decided in the end we shouldn't share a locker room, so they built in all separate locker rooms for us.
No way.
Space for that turf to go when it was rolled up, space for the band when our band played to keep all the equipment. There were a lot of things they did for us, and use of suites and stuff like that. In the end, that was pretty good.
That was really nice.
I felt like we got treated well.
Very good. And I mean, what was the Raiders? Were they excited to move here, or not?
The Raiders definitely were.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, both Mark Bedane and Mark Davis, because Mark Davis's dad, Al Davis, had long had a soft spot for Vegas that was very well known, and then in the transfer to the Sun, Mark Davis also did. But early on, the rest of the NFL was was a little skittish about it because hockey had already come in and proved to be successful. But it wasn't enough yet to prove to the other 31 NFL owners that it was the right move. There's some of them that wanted to do it, and a lot of them that were a little skittish. And gambling was a big deal. So we ended up having to kind of counter that argument. We had Bo Bernard, who's now just been moved over. Keith moved him over to run. He's VP of Advancement and Fundraising. But Bo is from Las Vegas and went to Harvard, played baseball, got his PhD here, and a hospitality professor, and for many years ran the Gaming Innovation Institute. And Bo's great. So we had Bo do a study of the gambling, of what effect gambling might have as the NFL would come into town. And the gist of his report, and it was so good that we sent the written report, and then they asked him to actually go present to a bunch of the owners. And the gist of it was, this is the most heavily regulated place for gambling in the world. So, I mean, there's no safer place to do it than here. And furthermore, people are gambling on your games, and already at that time, it was even, you could do it on your phone. They had they had big sponsorships with FanDuel and other companies that they were kind of already in the space anyway. It was like, guys, get over it. And eventually that won the day. His study and his presentation won over the owners, and it went through. But Bo, most people don't know, but Bo played a big role in getting that thing over the finish line, among many other people.
I want to have Bo on the podcast too. I would love
fun.
to. I'd love to learn a little bit more about his story as well, because I hear him all the time. I hear about him everywhere.
Real smart, very dynamic guy. Yeah,
and just seems like he does a lot in this town. It's wild. I hear from every event that I go to, it's like he's always around all the time. Like he's running at a different pace, So I'm interested to get to meet him. Do you have to get all the other owners to agree to a move like that?
Yeah. Ultimately, yes. It's so long ago now. I can't remember if it had to be unanimous, but they certainly had to have a good, sizable majority of them willing to then make the move, for the team to come in.
Why?
It's a very tightly held nonprofit. The NFL is technically a nonprofit. The teams make a lot of money, but it's 32 co-owners in a very tightly held corporation, and they tend not to move unless, it's the will of the group to move. And it's a very, you think about the owners, and it runs the gamut. It's a very different set of individuals, at the different, think about Jerry Jones, kind of corporatized, and Mark Davis is, more fun guy, quirky, fun guy, family operation when they were in Oakland. I mean, the owners are very different. They run the franchises differently. But they generally move lockstep with each other. That was our experience.
How fun. That's also really I think an interesting experience to just like look inside of. I mean, just to have that opportunity to see how this system works. What a unique opportunity.
Yeah.
I had another question about. I was going to say something about Jerry Jones versus. I don't know. I like Jerry Jones.
He was at the time very influential in the move.
Really?
Yeah, that was our understanding. Is that he had a lot of sway and influence with other owners. That if he was like the bell cow. Like if he got behind it, then we knew other owners would then kind of follow him.
Why is he such an important
I don't
player?
know. At the time he was, arguably, maybe not necessarily lately on field, but off field, pretty successful franchise, that people look to.
I mean, I think it's the most profitable franchise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you either love the Cowboys or you hate the Cowboys, but damn, he's built what looks like a hell of a business.
And they had built, not that too long before, he had gone through building a, really beautiful big facility. So that his experience made a difference with a lot of the other owners because we were, about to go through that as well. So,
good point.
Yeah.
What was the experience like building the actual thing? Like, were you involved with the actual building?
Yeah, I mean, that was being built while I was here, and just about, almost completed by the time that it was well underway anyway. By the time that I had left, it was fun, because I got to go over and get, be able to go early on to go to watch the dynamiting, the blasting that was going on, and then the structure then was going up when I went down to Claremont, but we kept our home here and I was back and forth a lot. So I got to do a lot of really fun kind of private hard hat tours as it was being built, to see the locker room, being built and that kind of stuff. And pretty gratifying. I mean, to see it come out of the ground and come to fruition. Years
of work that allowed for that existence.
A lot of people. I mean, I can't take credit.
A lot of people.
I played a small role, but yeah, it was fun. It was gratifying to see it finally happen.
I think it's just a lot of cumulative work, whether it be from you or from Bo and all these people. I mean, everybody from the person who's just sending the emails all the way to the person who's in the room, right?
Yeah.
You have such a huge project. It's not a small deal.
Everybody in the state. I mean, governor's office, legislature, county, city, the unions, the strip, the university. I mean, everybody, the business groups, the chambers, everybody had to be in sync.
How fun
for that thing to get across the finish line.
I wonder how often that really happens. Like, what's the likelihood of something like that happening?
Yeah.
Like, it takes a unique situation.
Similar. The medical school is a similar kind of thing. I mean, that took a lot of hard work from a lot of people to finally get that over the finish line. Almost all the same groups that I just mentioned. You know what I mean? It's a similar kind of initiative that I didn't think about this, but Bo Bernard said this to me, and he said, you think about institutions around the country that mounted big stadium projects, that mounted, launching and getting accredited a medical school, that became, working toward becoming a Carnegie R1 institution, built football practice facility, baseball practice facility, ranked number 1 in U.S. News for diversity. You start lining up all the things that had happened within about a 4-year period or pretty close. And he kind of went through the list and he goes, Yale built, did their medical school here, and North Carolina built their football stadium here, at this point along a 100-year continuum. But the fact that all that stuff happened in about a 4, 5, 6-year period is really unheard of. And that's Vegas, baby.
Damn.
It was a good time to be here. It continues. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff, and this is a place, to use a baseball analogy, that just swings for the fences, and we managed to get stuff done. It's a pretty dynamic city.
How cool. I mean, a lot of high performers that have to be involved. I mean, I think that's also the timeline. It's just in my head, I'm like, that's so much. Like, yeah, you have 3 meetings every single night that you have to go to, because the amount of things that are always going on to get this done in such a short amount of time, I think is outstanding and kind of
fun.
Ridiculous. It's just crazy. Yeah.
It was 4 years that went by very quickly.
I bet.
It was fun.
I bet. You have a book that's out.
Oh, yeah.
What's the name of the book?
Selfless Leadership. It's book on the theme of servant leadership. And I did it with Forbes book publishing. The Forbes media empire's got a book publishing arm. It came out just this last year in 2024. It did great. We hit several bestseller categories on Amazon. I've lost track, but close to 30 speaking engagements, I would say, and they continue. I've got several more booked out all through the end of the spring and into summer. It did way more than I thought it was going to do. I mean, I really thought, I'm going to write this. And Forbes said, you don't go into these things thinking you're going to make a lot of money on the book, but if you want to have impact, you want people to read it and make a difference, we can help you accomplish that, and we definitely did. Yeah, so it's been great experience.
Very nice. And people can get it on Amazon. People can get it anywhere.
The quickest, easiest is Amazon. You can buy it directly from Forbes on site there as well. They did really, as you might expect from Forbes, it's beautiful print version. They did an electronic version, and then the audiobook is the one that people have really loved. They got a professional actor to do the voiceover, and it's really well done. The audiobook, I was really proud of that part of it. It's pretty good, pretty cool.
Very cool. I don't know that it was out by the time last time we talked. I think the audiobook was still in process.
Yeah, could be.
I am an audiobook guy, so I will definitely give it a look-sees.
That was a fun deal because I thought I was going to have to read it, or now you can use AI to do your voice, but they asked me, they started by asking, talk about voices you like and think about actors. And I said, yeah, I'd probably like a male actor. And so I was like, Denzel Washington, whatever, Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
I was just picking all these really famous celebrities. And I just kind of liked their voices. Morgan Freeman was another one. And then they brought me, or sent to me virtually about 12 audio files of voice actors that they had just read the same section out of the book that I could listen to, and I nailed it down to 3 or 4, and then finally down to 1. And the guy, when you hear the voice, he does a lot of commercials and things, and you'll recognize the voice if you get the audiobook. But he turned out to be perfect, and I didn't realize it, but I was kind of picking somebody like me. He's got kind of a little bit at times rough, gravelly voice. He's kind of a little bit of a Northeast, kind of urban street kind of an accent. So I come from Italian background, really urban, blue-collar background. That comes out sometimes when I talk. And that was kind of the voice I picked. I didn't even think that that's what I was trying to achieve. But the guy's great, and the audio is cool. Quick anecdote. So somebody asked me to do a little voiceover for something on LinkedIn, and I didn't. And they had a little script, and I said, I'd love to do it. I just don't have the time to do this. And it was a graduate. She was a graduate student at Purdue University in the business school. That was asked me to do a favor for her. And she said, don't worry about it. She texting me in message on LinkedIn. And she said, I'll just use AI and I'll do a voiceover. And I was like, wait, what? And I'm like, all right, go for it. Send it to me first before you publish it on LinkedIn. And it sounds like me, exactly like me, but maybe like a really good version of my voice 10 years ago. I was a lot younger.
Very cleaned up.
Yeah. I was amazed at how good it is, how close it is to my voice.
I haven't used it yet, but I know that our producer Tyus has a book as well, and he's going to be doing an audio version. And I was like, are you going to read it? He's like, no, I'm just going to feed it to an AI.
Yeah.
Like, what? No.
It's amazing.
It's apparently really, really good.
And I'm not fiddled around like I know. I use ChatGPT a lot, and there's it was a plugin. Now it's actually available as a link you can click to do video. Really, really good still photography and video. I guess
really?
I've been told is really good.
I have not seen that.
Yeah, it's called like Sora or something like that.
I'll have to give that a look-see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in ChatGPT 4.0, and it's now a link in the left toolbar.
I use ChatGPT quite a bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just like, what is the meaning of life? Or like, and also like the application. And whenever I have a client, I'm like, okay, how do we use this like information over here? Creating a business plan for the first time, I was like, well, I guess like this is gonna be a good way to go about it. At least get like a rough idea, and then like cleaning up. It's just like there's so many use cases. I mean, it's amazing.
Oh, totally. I use it a lot, and it's useful for helping me fill in gaps. Like I'll miss something like that. Like you're gonna do a business plan, or you want to put together a term sheet. And it'll help me because it thinks of things I would have missed. I would have got 9/10 of it, but I thought, oh, that's good. I should put something in on that.
Yeah. I've used it for a negotiation once for a contract on equity on thing, and so I took the offer, I put it in ChatGPT. It's like, what are some like potential like individual pros and cons for each like piece of this contract?
Yeah.
And he gave me some really cool like, well, the pro here is this, but what you could negotiate is this, and I was like, oh, that's really kind of cool. So I ended up using a couple of those points, and I ended up getting what I wanted on a couple different things, and then not on a couple of other things, and then things that were like, hey, you could negotiate this. And I was like, I don't really care. Like it's not for me. And so let's just move on, right?
Yeah.
So it's cool. It's a cool tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guy, I mentioned the fellow, the attorney that I know that uses it on things. And when you got that powerful combo, like we said, of the human expert, really good at what they're doing, and then a really good language model, and because he'll feed it contracts and all kinds of other information, big, heavy, complicated documents and these state statutes. And he said, give me a read on then what you would do with this in this situation. And it's pretty powerful in the right hands. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
They just added deep research to it, and I haven't used it just yet. I'm doing 3 articles a night just on exercise physiology, or just in that kind of space of exercise science a night. And it gave me 3 really good ones that I read last night. But I didn't use deep research, oddly enough. I just like typed in, he gave me 3 things. And so I don't know. I assume that's like DeepSeek, right? Or the Deep Think from the DeepSeek entity. But I haven't used it. So I'm interested in using that in the future here soon. But we'll see.
It's one of the areas that is a weakness, I think. Still, it's getting better from version to version. But like if I put back my faculty hat, and then I'm now researcher, and I'm back in my lab, and we're doing something technical, serious, and I'm wanting to consult prior literature, it's still a little weak on that. Not as good as it could be, but it's definitely version by version by version. It keeps getting better and better and better at that. And I think it's we're not too far away from it being able to do that really well.
Yeah, I think it's just it pulls a lot of old publications, and like there's value in old publications. Don't get me wrong, I get that, but like sometimes I want something a little bit more new, innovative, updated. Yeah. So give me something a little bit newer. But I mean, I'm sure I could like put.
It's pulling from words it sees that it thinks are related, but it might miss that. The group at the University of Minnesota at the time was using a research method that really is highly relevant for what I'm doing, but doesn't necessarily come through in the published papers. And it just can't pick up stuff like that. It just doesn't have access to it. Yeah. But that if I kind of talk to my network, somebody will say, you remember Geraldine DeSanctis, in the group at Minnesota, you want to go talk to her graduate student because they were doing some stuff, that used this algorithm in a certain way. And that chat just doesn't know that stuff. Nobody does. It's in people's heads.
Yeah. That's why having a good network is important.
Yeah.
Having good people around is super important.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Boy, easiest LinkedIn. That's what I've been pointing people to. But little website at lenjessup.com, but LinkedIn's the easiest way. Len Jessup, I'm on there. Anybody searches Len Jessup Las Vegas, they'll find me on there.
Beautiful. Yeah. Any last words?
No, thanks for doing this. I love the digs here. Pretty cool.
Yeah, super awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
You guys promised me I could take this table home, so can you guys help me?
We'll fit it into the Tesla. Only if it fits in the Tesla.
I might have to cut it into pieces. Maybe it won't work.
We'll figure it out. Thank you so much.
All right.
We'll see you later. Thanks, guys. Love y'all. Bye.